Alright, so, confession time. Every single time a character of mine dies, my brain does not think, oh no, tragedy, it thinks, cool, new middle management just got involved. Because that's genuinely what death is in a lot of D&D settings. It's not some cosmic void of nothingness, it's a filing system. There's a woman with a clipboard, metaphorically, who is now personally aware that you, specifically, stopped existing today, and she is going to process that paperwork whether you like it or not. That woman is the Raven Queen, and frankly, she's got one of the most thankless jobs in the entire multiverse, because nobody prays to death and means it. Nobody's out here going, "Oh Raven Queen, bless me with more of the thing everyone is trying to avoid." And yet here she is, doing the job anyway, with birds. So today, we're going to talk about the deity in charge of the ultimate paperwork, why she's neither a saint nor a monster about it, and why, out of every death god in the multiverse, she might honestly be the most reasonable one on the payroll. So here's the thing that makes the Raven Queen weird right out of the gate. She's not evil. She's not some skeletal overlord cackling about souls. She's lawful neutral, which if you know your alignment chart is basically the DMV of morality. She doesn't hate you. She doesn't love you. She has a job, and the job is death happens, on schedule, no exceptions, no favorites. That's it. That's the whole deal. And somehow that makes her scarier than half the actually evil gods, because you can't bargain your way out of a bureaucrat who genuinely does not care about your sob story. Her origin, though, that's where it gets interesting, because depending on which edition or setting you're reading, she wasn't always a goddess, and she definitely wasn't always the one holding this job. In a lot of tellings, she used to be mortal, or at least mortal adjacent, some kind of being who existed before ascending into the role. And I do mean role very literally, because in settings like the Shadowfell's version of things, being the god of death isn't a bloodline, it's a position. You can lose it. Someone can take it from you. It's less divine birthright and more hostile corporate takeover, except the company is the concept of dying. There have reportedly been previous holders of the death god job before her, and if that doesn't tell you everything about how unstable this gig is, I don't know what will. Some versions of her lore even tie her rise to grief itself, like she became what she is because of loss, and then decided, well, if I have to feel this forever, I might as well be the one in charge of making sure everyone else's loss is at least handled properly. Which, weirdly, is kind of sweet. In a deeply messed up way. Like, imagine your worst breakup ever, except instead of getting a cat and doom scrolling, you ascend to godhood and take over an entire cosmic department. Respect, honestly. Her domain, the Shadowfell, is basically the mirror universe of the regular world, except everything's been left out in the rain for 6 years and nobody watered the plants. It's not hell. It's not some torture realm. It's just draining. Colors are muted, hope evaporates a little faster than it should, and the whole plane runs on a kind of ambient melancholy that seeps into anyone who spends too long there. Entire towns in the Shadowfell exist just fine, mind you, people live there, but they live there the way you'd live in a house with slightly too dim lighting forever. It's not evil, it's just sad, and there's a difference, and the Raven Queen presides over the whole gloomy expanse like she's the world's most competent middle manager who just happens to manage sorrow as a filing category. Now here's where the actual job description comes in, because being the goddess of death in D&D doesn't mean she personally shows up with a scythe every time someone fails a death save. That's not how any of this works. What she actually governs is the natural order of death, meaning things dying when they're supposed to, souls moving on when they're supposed to, and critically, things not coming back when they're not supposed to. This is the important part. This is the part that actually matters mechanically at the table. The Raven Queen despises undeath. Not dislikes it as a personal quirk, despises it, structurally, as a violation of the entire system she's built her whole godly identity around. Every zombie, every lich, every vampire shuffling around not being appropriately dead is basically an unpaid invoice she has to deal with, and she does not forgive unpaid invoices. This is why her clerics and paladins, when you see them in a campaign, tend to be some of the most reliable undead hunters in the setting. It's not incidental flavor, it's literally their job description from the top down. If you're building a paladin whose oath is basically death should be respected, not mocked, congratulations, you have found your patron, and she is going to be thrilled every single time you turn a skeleton back into a pile of bones that stays a pile of bones. But, and this is the fun twist, she's also not exactly thrilled about resurrection either, even the good kind. Raise dead, revivify, all your classic party wipe insurance spells, technically those are also violations of the natural order from her perspective. She allows them, mostly, because gods have to pick their battles and mortals reviving their fallen cleric friend once in a while isn't worth starting a cosmic incident over, but push it too far, bring people back too many times, cheat death too flagrantly, and you will get her attention, and it will not be the good kind of attention. There are stories, some more mechanical than others depending on your table, of her outright refusing to let a soul return, of a raise dead spell just failing, no reason given, no refund, because she decided that particular soul's number was up and that was that. Try arguing with the goddess of, it's happening on schedule. You will lose. Her actual method of, let's call it, processing, ravens. Obviously. It's in the name, but the specifics are kind of great. Ravens in her lore aren't just a spooky aesthetic choice, they're functionally her eyes and ears throughout the mortal world and beyond. A raven watching you a little too intently in some settings isn't just a raven, it's a very small, very judgmental HR representative confirming that yes, your time is in fact coming up, and no, there is no meeting scheduled to discuss an extension. And here's a detail I genuinely love, some lore has it that she personally appears, or sends an aspect of herself, to witness particularly significant deaths. Not everyone's. She's not micromanaging every peasant who trips into a well, that's beneath the goddess of death pay grade, delegate that to the mid-level bureaucracy of the afterlife. But major deaths, heroic deaths, tragic deaths, the kind that matter to the story of the world, she shows up. Sometimes silent. Sometimes she speaks. It's less, Grim Reaper coming to collect, and more, the actual CEO personally attending your exit interview because your role was important enough to warrant it. That's oddly touching for a death god, and I think that's kind of the whole point of her as a character. She's not cruel. She's just committed to the process being followed correctly, and sometimes that commitment looks a lot like respect. Now let's talk about what happens when you actually die and she's involved, because there's a specific piece of lore that I think is criminally underused at most tables. Some settings describe her offering the recently deceased, in that brief window before the soul fully departs, a choice, or at least an audience. Not everyone gets it. But certain souls, ones who died with unfinished business, ones whose deaths mattered enormously to the world, get a moment with her. And what she offers isn't mercy exactly, it's clarity. She'll tell you the truth about your death, plainly, without softening it, because that's just who she is. No comforting lies. No, you did great, sweetie. Just the honest, factual account of how and why you died, delivered with the emotional warmth of someone reading you your own obituary out loud. And somehow that's still more compassionate than half the death gods out there who just as soon torment you for fun. Let's do a little crunch section here because I know some of you are just waiting for the stats. If your table's using her clerics, the domains associated with her tend to skew death and Twilight, or grave in some versions, depending on your edition, and honestly all three fit her disturbingly well. Grave domain clerics get abilities themed around sensing undeath and preventing it, which, shocking absolutely nobody, lines up perfectly with her entire cosmic pet peeve. Twilight domain, meanwhile, leans into that comforting melancholy vibe, guiding lost souls, easing suffering, being a calm presence in someone's final moments, which honestly reads like flavor text written specifically about her even when the domain itself doesn't name-check her directly. Her paladins, if your setting supports an Oathbreaker adjacent or death-oriented oath, tend to get similar undead-smiting, soul-guarding vibes, and mechanically they're some of the better answers to a lich-heavy campaign you could possibly build. If your DM keeps throwing undead at you and you're getting tired of it, might I suggest praying to the woman whose entire personality is, undead shouldn't exist, actually, and see how that goes for you. As for her personally, most sourcebooks are cagey about giving her hard stat block numbers, because greater deities usually don't get dragged down to combat stats. That's not really the point of them, the point is you don't fight death, you eventually just become her problem. But thematically, whatever power level you slot her at, she should feel less like a monster to overcome and more like an inevitability you're temporarily delaying. Any DM running her as a boss fight is kind of missing the point. The correct way to use her at a table isn't combat, it's negotiation, its consequence, it's the quiet dread of a raven landing on your windowsill the night before a big battle. Now, a few weirder facts because we always end up here eventually. In some settings she's explicitly tied to the concept of fate alongside death, meaning she doesn't just process the dying, she's got opinions on destiny too, which raises the delightfully uncomfortable question of whether some deaths are less random bad luck and more scheduled maintenance she personally signed off on. There's also lore suggesting she was once in a relationship, or something adjacent to one, before ascending, and that grief over that connection is baked into why she's so protective of the sanctity of death now. Make of that what you will, but Goddess of Death is like this because of Heartbreak is objectively a banger of a backstory hook, and if your DM hasn't used it yet, please bully them into using it. There's also the fact that she reportedly loathes the idea of forced immortality just as much as she loathes undeath, meaning liches, vampires, and also, weirdly, certain fey bargains that trap souls indefinitely are all on her cosmic naughty list. She's not anti-life. She's anti-cheating. If you die, you're supposed to actually get to move on, not get stuck in some loop because a warlock patron thought eternal servitude sounded fun. She'd absolutely smite that warlock patron given the chance, and honestly, valid. So, moral and vibe verdict time. Is the Raven Queen a good goddess? I don't think good is really the right axis to judge her on, and I think that's kind of the appeal. She's not up there granting boons out of love for her followers, she's up there making sure a very important cosmic system doesn't collapse into chaos, and she happens to do it with a weird sort of somber dignity that a lot of louder, flashier death gods just don't have. She's not going to reward you for being edgy about death. She's not going to punish you for grieving. She just wants the paperwork filed correctly, and if you respect that, she'll respect you right back, in her own quiet, raven-shaped way. Honestly, out of every deity we've covered on this channel, she might be the one I'd actually want handling my character's death, because at least I know it'd be handled with some dignity instead of getting turned into somebody's arcane battery or spider goddess plaything. Small mercies, but mercies nonetheless. One more thing worth digging into before we wrap, because I think it explains a lot about why she reads so differently from every other death deity you've probably encountered. Her relationship with mortals who actively work for her isn't transactional in the way most divine patronage is. Most gods want worship, tribute, temples, the whole song and dance. The Raven Queen mostly just wants competence. Show up, do the job of maintaining the natural order, don't cheat the system, and she'll leave you alone to live your life until it's, well, not your life anymore. There's something almost refreshing about a goddess whose primary demand is, be good at your job, rather than grovel appropriately on the third Tuesday of every month. She's less a tyrant and more the world's most no-nonsense supervisor, the kind who never says thank you but also never micromanages you, and somehow that's scarier and more respectable at the same time. It also means her followers tend to be an unusually practical bunch compared to the clergy of flashier gods. You don't see a lot of Raven Queen zealots frothing at the mouth about prophecy or holy war. You see grave tenders, morticians, hospice workers, soldiers who've made peace with the idea that dying well matters as much as living well, and the occasional grim vigilante who's decided that the local vampire infestation is, professionally speaking, unacceptable and needs to be handled. It's a surprisingly grounded religion for something built entirely around the concept of the void waiting for all of us. There's dignity in the mundanity of it, and I think that's deliberate on the part of whoever wrote her lore. Death shouldn't be a spectacle. It should just be handled properly, quietly, and on time, like a competent utility company, except the utility is your soul's departure from your body. And that, weirdly, loops back around to why I think she works so well at a table specifically. A lot of DMs default to death gods as either edgy villain fodder or a cheap source of spooky flavor text, and sure, you can absolutely use her that way if you want, nobody's stopping you. But the more interesting version of her, the one that actually sticks with players, is the quieter one. The raven on the windowsill that doesn't attack anyone, it just watches. The NPC cleric who won't so much as raise an eyebrow at a party member's death because grief isn't really her department, acceptance is. The moment, late in a campaign, where a beloved NPC dies and instead of a monster showing up, there's just silence, and then, if you're feeling dramatic as a DM, a single raven landing nearby, and nothing else needs to be said. That's the Raven Queen doing her job. That's the whole vibe. Not menace. Just inevitability, delivered with something almost like tenderness. If you're building a campaign around her, my honest advice is to resist the urge to make her the final boss. She's so much scarier, and so much more compelling, as the deity your players slowly start respecting instead of fearing, the one who never smites them for grieving but absolutely will not budge an inch if they try to cheese their way around death one too many times. Let her be reasonable right up until the exact moment reasonableness runs out, and then let that consequence land with the full weight of an actual cosmic law being enforced, not a villain monologuing about power. That contrast, the calm bureaucracy giving way to genuine, unstoppable finality, is what makes her one of the more quietly terrifying entries in the entire D&D pantheon, and honestly one of the more human ones too, in spite of technically not being one. Anyway, that's the Raven Queen, Death's most committed middle manager, unionizing the multiverse one soul at a time. If you've got a deity, plane, or monster you want dissected like this next, drop it in the comments, and as always, feel free to like and subscribe, or don't, I'm not going to send a raven after you either way. Probably. Thanks for watching. Take care out there, and have a good one.